In this video, I'm going to tell you about the dreaded snowball effect in campaign games and maybe hopefully give you some ideas of what you can do about it. So if you're new to tabletop wargaming, you may have not played any campaign games yet. If you've been playing role-playing games for a while, you know what a campaign is. It's not just a one-night stand where you sit down with your friends and play Dungeons and Dragons just for one night and then the story's over. A campaign keeps going. You get together every week or a couple of times a week or every 2 weeks or however frequently you get together and you keep playing. I've talked to friends of mine who have been playing specific campaigns of role-playing games for years, and that's not unexpected. I don't want to say it's the norm, but it's not an outlier. Campaigns are huge in role-playing games. They're not the only game in town because there are some role-playing games that are designed to be played just one session. But for the most part, campaigns are the way that role-playing games happen. Now, I would say that the majority of tabletop war games is done pretty much kind of a one-off situation. If you go to a tournament, it's very rarely not a campaign. It's you and I play, one of us wins, we go on to the next round, that kind of stuff. And with a lot of people who play, especially when you're first starting out, you're kind of trying to feel out and figure out how to play and how your army works and how the rule system works. So you play one-off games. You need to walk before you can run. But once you get to the point where you've done enough of those single-player games, those single-session games with just you and another person, you're going to want to start to run. So normally in wargaming, campaign games are generally not done open-ended like they are in role-playing games. They're generally done usually 3 games, maybe 4 games, maybe 5 games, maybe even more. Depends on the players and the kind of time that they have. It also depends on the game. It's very easy to play a skirmish game and do a short campaign in a single day. You could do 3 games of Kill Team, for example, or Song of Blades and Heroes, or even a game, like Frostgrave, which has got a little bit of a D&D tip to it, and it's got a little bit of that going on, but you could still at least do 2, if not 3, depending on how much time you've got in the day, and potentially finish a campaign all in one day. But when you're playing bigger games and you're playing a big Age of Sigmar campaign, or you're playing a big 40K campaign, or a historical, or bolt action, that type of historical, or the real crazy, historical stuff with the little tiny lead guys and all of that, DBA, all those different types of games that if you're new to the game, you may not necessarily have heard of some of these different games. Those can take really long times, and those campaigns, when stretched out, can really eat up a good portion of your hobby time. So what's the snowball effect that I mentioned back at the beginning of this whole thing? Well, the way that campaigns normally work is that they're linked. We play the first game, and then stuff happens. And at the end of the game, we determine what goes on in the next game. The scenarios themselves have generally already been picked, although sometimes you can have campaigns where, depending on the outcome, the scenarios can fork, where like if, maybe game 1, no matter who loses or wins, we're going to go on to scenario 2 in game 2, and then depending on who wins that one, we're either going to do scenario A or B for round 3. So it could work those ways, but on the other hand, it could just work, we're going to play this scenario, this scenario, this scenario, and this scenario. The issue is that if one player very kind of powerfully wins the first one, really kind of overkills that first one, it can really start to cause trouble for the campaign as a whole. The snowball effect is when, after the first round, one player, let's say, has lost a bunch of their people. In skirmish games, it's frequently about individuals, and sometimes they die in between rounds, as opposed to come back and maybe come back with an injury, or maybe they come back and everything's fine. They've been completely patched up by the medic or whatever. But let's say one player lost a bunch of people, the other player didn't. One player didn't get any cool extra resources, the other player did, and now the first player there that lost all the people and lost the resources is definitely behind the 8 ball going into the second game. And it makes it very difficult to kind of turn those tides and switch. So that means that probably that person who didn't lose too many people and got a lot of resources is most likely going to win the second game. And then it's going to become even easier for them to win the third game. And that's the snowball effect. Once it starts rolling downhill, it gets bigger as it picks up more speed and more snow. And then it becomes something you've really got to worry about. And the trick is that for some players, that's fine. But for some players, they kind of don't like that whole system. A lot of players don't enjoy playing a game when there's absolutely no possibility of them winning. So if you're 2 or 3 steps into the whole campaign and you're really far behind in resources and you've got very few veterans left and everybody's a newbie, or maybe you don't even have nearly as many people as you started with because you just don't have the resources to bring them back, and it depends on, what kind of campaign rules you're playing with, you can get into a situation where there's just no winning. And then for some players, most players, that's really kind of disheartening. Every once in a while you'll find somebody who's like, well, I'm going to I'll do this myself sometimes where I'm like, I know I can't win, but I'm going to make sure that I at least kill that one guy. And maybe that guy's an HQ unit, or maybe it's just a regular troop, but I think he's given me the eye, and I don't like the looks of his jib, his particular jib, and the way that and so I'm going to kill that guy. I'm going to take all my guys and make sure to kill that guy, because I know I can't win, I can't get the resources, I can't get the objectives or whatever, but I'll take out just that one guy. That's me making my own fun, but a lot of people generally are, when they are given the ability, hey, let's go play this third round, there's no way I can win. And I do that too sometimes when I just go, well, there's no way I can win, and then I end up winning. That's sometimes just a defeatist attitude where like you lose like one guy right early in the beginning of the game, and then you're like, well, I'm done. Always go against that feeling. I can't tell you how many times I've played against people who like they lose something big at the first round and they're like, well, game's over, and then it turns out the game's not actually over. But this is a different story. This is you actually stacked, the cards are stacked pretty hard against you, and that you're missing resources and you don't have as many people. So what can you do when that snowball has already started rolling downhill? Some campaigns will try to use, for lack of a better term, a blue shell. If you've ever played Mario Kart on whatever game system you might have been playing it on, there's this blue shell, which when a user uses it, a gamer, fires it off or whatever, it just seeks whoever's in first place and knocks them down a peg. That's lazy, I think, personally, in design. It works fine. And, obviously there have been friendships broken in Mario Kart because of the blue shell, but in general, it's fine, but it's lazy. I think if you're going to try to do something in those situations to try to make that snowball stop rolling downhill so much in the campaign, there are other things that you can do. Things that I've seen that have worked well are also kind of a video gamey, if not Mario Kart sort of situation. It's called rubber banding. So rubber banding is basically you're kind of giving bonuses to the people in the back. If this is the leader in the Mario Kart, you're giving bonuses to them to sort of kind of use the rubber band to pull them back up to the front. And you can do that in skirmish games, campaigns. You can sit down and say, okay, if one player, whatever, loses 2 turns in a row, then they're going to get some sort of kind of, reinforcement in the next game, or they're going to get some sort of, nothing that's as terrible as a blue shell, whereas like I'm going to hurt the other guy. It's more of I'm going to give a bonus to the person who's behind, which is more of a rubber band and less of a blue shell. That type of thing that you want to generally write into the the scenario earlier, so that when and if this does happen, then it'll come down to it. Best case scenario, and this is difficult for campaigns, but best case scenario is that each game is pretty evenly matched and that it's a very, very, very tight race all the way to the end. That's great, but it doesn't usually happen. A lot of times, depending on how the rules are gone, you have a tendency to shift, and then there's the snowball. And so you have to think about sometimes rubber band rules to see if you can help kind of give a little boost to the person who's frankly kind of losing. My other favorite solution, frankly, is to just quit. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to just take all my toys and go home. I don't mean like that. I mean, if you've already gone 1 or 2 games into what could potentially be a 5 or a 6 game, campaign, if it's gone really, really poorly, For the first 2, maybe the first 3, just end it. You don't have to play the entire 5 or 6 or whatever. Maybe you start over and you play a short 3 one again. Or maybe you just decide to completely start over, try to do another 6, change up everybody's lists, see what happens, go that direction. Just because you were planning on playing a campaign that was going to be, let's say, 6 games doesn't mean you have to drag it all the way out to the bitter puking end just because one player is way ahead and the other player is way behind. If that happens, well, just end it. You can just be like, okay, that's cool. I got skunked real early. It was bad luck, bad dice, bad planning, whatever you want to put it on. And then just decide to start over and start a new campaign. Maybe you tweak the campaign rules. Maybe you just tweak your lists. Maybe you switch armies and try to see how that works out. There's a lot of different options for playing linked games and keeping them fun and still being able to kind of tweak them on the fly. Linked campaigns are a lot of fun once you've gotten your legs under you. Once you've learned the game system, if you're new to wargaming in general, I wouldn't start off with a campaign. If you're new to this specific game, but you've been wargaming for a while, I'd still get some regular kind of simple beginner games, one-offs, under your belt before you move into campaigns. But once you do, they can be, frankly, very, very memorable because they tell a story. That sequential nature of then this happened, and then the next game this happened, and then because of this happened in the next game, that helps to really expand the narrative in your wargaming and make it less of a, well, let's just get together and play, and more of, hey, let's get together and build a story.